The rain didn't drown her, it baptized her. The storm hadn't stopped when Maya stepped into the night. It only grew louder, as if the sky itself was mourning everything she'd lost. But loss has a strange way of clearing what was never meant to stay. Her shoes sloshed through puddles, her hair clung to her face, and for the first time, the city didn't look cruel, it looked alive. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, one name blinking through the screen: Zara. The same Zara Adrian had once called a bad influence, the same Zara who told her years ago, "If you ever need me, don't hesitate." Maya hesitated for only a second, then answered. Her voice trembled. "Zara, can I come over?" She didn't ask why, she didn't judge, she just said always. That one word, always, became the bridge between who Maya had been and who she was about to become. By the time Zara opened the door, Maya looked like a ghost, soaked, silent, and shivering. She didn't speak, she just wrapped a blanket around her and guided her to the couch. Steam from a cup of tea rose between them like forgiveness. "Tell me what happened," Zara said softly. Maya's lips quivered. He threw me out." Zara's eyes hardened, not with pity, but with quiet fury. "Then you don't go back. Ever." Maya nodded, but her eyes filled with tears. "I don't even know where to start." Zara smiled faintly. "Then start small. Start messy. But start, Maya." That night, Maya fell asleep to the sound of rain, not as a victim, but as someone reborn in its rhythm. She lost her home, but found her heartbeat. The next morning, sunlight leaked through the curtains like a promise. Zara had made breakfast, omelette, toast, and something Maya hadn't tasted in years: peace. "You can stay here as long as you need," Zara said. Maya nodded, her voice quiet. "I don't want to be a burden." "Then don't. Be a comeback." Those words lit something inside Maya, something Adrian had spent years trying to extinguish. Later that day, Zara showed her how to freelance online. "Start here," she said, pointing to her laptop. "Digital marketing. You're creative. It'll fit you." At first, the screen looked foreign. Algorithms, ad copies, analytics, it all felt too much. But every click became a step away from her old life. Every small success, a rebellion. At night, when the city slept, she worked, sometimes until sunrise. She watched tutorials, took online courses, joined communities of creators. Her eyes burned, but her spirit didn't. The world had tried to bury her, but it didn't know she was a seed. Weeks turned into months. The ache didn't vanish, but it transformed. She stopped looking at her phone for his messages. She stopped wondering if he missed her, because she realized the man who couldn't value her presence would never mourn her absence. Instead, she began creating. Every insult he threw became a brick in her foundation. She started sketching designs, small pieces of jewelry inspired by the rain that had changed her life, raindrop pendants, lightning-shaped earrings. She named the line after Storm. To her surprise, the first few posts under her new alias, M. Ray, began gaining attention. People loved the story she hinted at through her art. One comment read, "There's power in your pieces, like they've survived something." She smiled. They have, she thought. So have I. Soon, she began selling through a small online store. The first week, she sold 3 items, then 10, then 50. Orders started flooding in from all over. Zara cheered her on like a sister. "You're doing it, Maya. You're actually doing it." Maya laughed, breathless, tears in her eyes. It's just the start. What she didn't know was that somewhere across the city, Adrian's empire was starting to crack. Adrian Malik was known for his confidence, but confidence, when mixed with arrogance, turns toxic. He ignored warnings from his financial advisors, overexpanded, overhired, understood nothing but pride. At board meetings, people whispered that he'd lost focus, that his temper was driving clients away. He couldn't understand why nothing worked anymore. Deals collapsed, investors pulled out, and slowly his once mighty company began to bleed. And yet he still believed he was untouchable. He thought she was beneath him, not realizing she was already rising above. While his empire sank, Maya's brand, M. Ray, soared. She partnered with small influencers, built emotional campaigns, and told her story through silence and art. Her jewelry wasn't just fashion, it was freedom crafted in silver. Each sale felt like a tiny victory, each review a reminder that she mattered. Zara often caught her working late, eyes shining with something fierce and unstoppable. "You don't rest anymore," Zara teased. "I rested for years. Now I rise."
Her growth was slow but unstoppable, like dawn. Then came the day that changed everything. One of her designs, Raindrop Revival, was featured on a popular lifestyle blog. The headline read, "Anonymous designer behind viral jewelry brand inspires women everywhere." Her website crashed from too much traffic, orders tripled overnight. Maya sat before her screen, trembling. This was real. The same woman who'd once been told she was useless was now building something people loved, something that had her name, even if hidden under M. Ray. He thought he'd erased her, but she was just rewriting herself. Adrian saw the article too. At first he scrolled past, then stopped. The brand name After Storm caught his eye. "Who names a company that?" he muttered, smirking. Probably another social media gimmick. He had no idea that the woman behind it was the same one he'd thrown out into the rain. Meanwhile, Maya moved into her own small apartment, her first home built by her own hands, her own money. The walls were bare, but they held peace. Every night she'd light a candle by the window and whisper to herself, "You made it through the storm." She didn't want revenge, not yet. What she wanted was herself, and she was finally finding her. But fate, like rain, has a way of circling back. A luxury boutique reached out for a collaboration. They wanted after-storm pieces featured in their next collection. It was a dream offer. There was just one condition. The deal would go through Adrian Malik's firm, the very company that once built its empire by silencing women like her. Maya froze. Her past and present had just collided. Zara noticed her hesitation. "You're not backing out, are you?" Maya's voice was steady. "No, I'm walking back in, but this time through the front door." He threw her out of his world, and she built one so big he'd have to walk through her gates to survive. That night, as she finalized the contract, Maya looked out at the city lights again. The same lights that once blurred through rain when she left everything behind. But now, she wasn't running from the storm. She was the storm. And the next thunder was not far away.
He promised her forever, until forever became inconvenient. Maya Khan had always believed in simple things. Morning tea before sunrise, jasmine in her hair, and the quiet comfort of love that didn't need grand gestures. When she married Adrian Malik, it felt like a fairy tale, the kind that small-town girls dream about but never live. He was everything she wasn't. Confident, magnetic, successful, the kind of man who filled every room with his voice and his charm. And in the beginning, he made her feel seen. He loved her innocence, her humility, the way she listened when he spoke about his dreams, his plans, his empire. To him, she was peace in a world full of ambition. To her, he was the storm that made her heart race. But storms don't stay gentle for long. It started small, the kind of moments you only notice in hindsight. The first time he dismissed her suggestion with a laugh. The first time he cut her off mid-sentence at a dinner party. The first time he called her cute when she spoke about starting her own small art studio. At first, Maya ignored it, told herself he was just tired, overworked, that marriage wasn't a movie, that love meant patience, not pride. But patience has a breaking point. He didn't shout to break her spirit. He laughed, and that hurt more. It was a Saturday evening when the laughter turned sharp. Adrian was hosting one of his networking dinners, the kind where wine flowed faster than sincerity. Maya sat beside him, polite smile fixed, wearing the dress he'd chosen. She tried to join the conversation, but each time she spoke, his friends exchanged looks, subtle, amused. Then came the moment. Someone joked about wives who spend their husband's money. Adrian chuckled, leaned back in his chair, and said, "Don't look at me, guys. My wife's unemployed, but at least she's got Wi-Fi." Laughter erupted around the table. Even the waiters tried not to look. Maya froze. Every smile in the room blurred. Every breath felt heavy. She wanted to disappear. She looked at him, really looked at him, and realized he wasn't joking. He was enjoying it. That night, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared out the window as the city lights blurred through the glass. Something inside her quietly cracked, and something else started to grow in its place. The next morning, she tried to talk to him, calmly. "Adrian, what you said last night, it hurt." He didn't even look up from his phone. "Maya, don't be dramatic. It was a joke. You need to lighten up." She swallowed her pride again. "I just think you think too much.
maybe if you actually did something, you wouldn't have time to overthink. That line stayed with her, like a thorn under her skin. From that day on, Maya noticed how carefully he had built her cage. He handled every bill, every account. He'd take care of everything, which meant she had no control. He discouraged her from working, saying, "You don't need to. I provide." At first, it felt like love. Later, it felt like ownership. He called it protection, but it was really possession. Weeks turned into months. Maya's laughter faded into silence. She painted less, smiled less, and began to disappear in her own home. He controlled her schedule. He checked her phone for safety. He told her who to avoid, who was bad influence. Even her old college friend Zara, gone from her life because Adrian thought she was too independent. But every control has a counterpoint, a moment when submission becomes awareness. One afternoon, she found an old sketchbook from her art school days. Inside, she had written, "If they ever silence you, draw louder." She traced her fingers over those words and realized how far she had fallen from the woman she used to be. That night, when Adrian came home, she asked him softly, "Do you still love me?" He looked at her like she was an inconvenience. "Love you? Maya, you really need to stop with these emotional questions. I'm tired." He walked away, left her standing there. That was the first night she didn't wait for him to come to bed. Sometimes silence screams louder than words. The next weeks were a blur of loneliness and quiet humiliation. Adrian's empire was growing. More clients, more money, more praise. The more successful he became, the smaller she felt beside him. And then came the night, the one that changed everything. It was raining. Heavy, relentless, like the sky itself was angry. Adrian came home late, smelling of whiskey and arrogance. Maya was sitting by the window, lost in thought. He stumbled in, irritated, muttering about a deal gone wrong. When she asked gently, "Are you okay?" he snapped. "Why do you always ask stupid questions? You wouldn't understand business if it slapped you." Her hands trembled. "I was just trying to... To what? Help? Maya, you can't even help yourself. You've been sitting here for months pretending you're some artist. Let's face it, you're useless." That word hit harder than any slap could. She whispered, "Don't talk to me like that." He laughed. "Or what? You'll leave? You wouldn't survive a week without me." That was the moment she stopped being afraid. She stood up. "Maybe I'll find out." He stared at her, stunned that she finally talked back. "You think you can threaten me?" Then, in a burst of anger, he shouted, "Get out! If you think you can survive without me, go. Let's see how long your pride feeds you." She looked at him one last time, the man she once loved, now a stranger with his husband's face. And she walked out. The rain hit her skin like ice, cold, stinging, real. But for the first time in years, she felt alive. Behind her, she heard the door slam shut, the sound of endings and beginnings colliding. That night, he closed the door on her, not knowing it was the last time he would ever hold the upper hand. Maya didn't look back. The city lights blurred through the storm, her clothes soaked, her breath shaking, but her eyes were steady. Because somewhere between his cruelty and that rain, something inside her had finally woken up. And it would never sleep again.
He lost his empire chasing ego. She built hers chasing purpose. The morning light hit differently now. No longer the light that filtered through the curtains of Adrian Malik's mansion, the one that once made her feel small in his shadow. Now it streamed through wide glass windows of a small yet sunlit studio, where Maya Khan, now known to the world as M. Ray, was creating art that glimmered with defiance. The hum of the city below, the soft clinking of her handmade jewelry, and that silent whisper inside her, "You made it out." Freedom didn't roar, it whispered in her ear every morning she didn't wake up afraid. Her brand, Ray, had begun as a spark in a storm. A single Instagram post, a single bracelet named the Phoenix. It went viral overnight. Not because it was expensive, not because of luxury branding, but because every piece told a story. A story of a woman who rose after being broken. Her captions were poetry, her designs defiance. And though the world adored M. Ray, no one knew the face behind the name. They didn't need to. The mystery was the power.
Zara would often watch her work late into the night, her hands steady, her eyes burning with a focus that bordered on holy. "You're not just selling jewelry, Maya," Zara said softly one evening. "You're selling survival." Maya smiled faintly. "No," she whispered, "I'm selling rebirth." While he drowned in pride, she learned to breathe underwater. Across the city, Adrian Malik was losing grip. His once thriving company, AM Industries, had begun to crumble. Bad investments, wasted opportunities, and above all, arrogance. He'd spent years chasing validation instead of vision, power instead of purpose. The markets were changing, but Adrian refused to. His board began turning on him, lawsuits started piling up, and for the first time, the man who once made others tremble felt fear crawling up his spine. He'd built his kingdom on control, and now control was slipping through his fingers. He slammed his desk one morning, shouting at his assistant, "Find me any brand that can partner with us, anyone trending, anyone who can make AM relevant again." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, there's a brand everyone's talking about lately. A jewelry line, Ray." Adrian's brow furrowed. "Ray? Never heard of it." "Sir, they've exploded online. Feminine, powerful branding. The mystery behind the designer is part of their allure." Adrian nodded slowly. "Get me a meeting." He lost his empire chasing ego. She built hers chasing purpose. The morning light hit differently now. No longer the light that filtered through the curtains of Adrian Malik's mansion, the one that once made her feel small in his shadow. Now it streamed through wide glass windows of a small yet sunlit studio where Maya Khan, now known to the world as M. Ray, was creating art that glimmered with defiance. The hum of the city below, the soft clinking of her handmade jewelry, and that silent whisper inside her, "You made it out." Freedom didn't roar, it whispered in her ear every morning she didn't wake up afraid. Her brand, Ray, had begun as a spark in a storm. A single Instagram post, a single bracelet named The Phoenix. It went viral overnight, not because it was expensive, not because of luxury branding, but because every piece told a story of a woman who rose after being broken. Her captions were poetry, her designs defiance. And though the world adored M. Ray, no one knew the face behind the name. They didn't need to. The mystery was the power. Zara would often watch her work late into the night, her hands steady, her eyes burning with a focus that bordered on holy. "You're not just selling jewelry, Maya," she said softly one evening. "You're selling survival." Maya smiled faintly. "No," she whispered, "I'm selling rebirth." While he drowned in pride, she learned to breathe underwater. Across the city, Adrian Malik was losing grip. His once thriving company, AM Industries, had begun to crumble. Bad investments, wasted opportunities, and above all, arrogance. He'd spent years chasing validation instead of vision, power instead of purpose. The markets were changing, but Adrian refused to. His board began turning on him, lawsuits started piling up, and for the first time, the man who once made others tremble felt fear crawling up his spine. He'd built his kingdom on control, and now control was slipping through his fingers. He slammed his desk one morning, shouting at his assistant, "Find me any brand that can partner with us, anyone trending, anyone who can make AM relevant again." The assistant hesitated. "Sir, there's a brand everyone's talking about lately, a jewelry line, Ray." Adrian's brow furrowed. "Ray? Never heard of it." "Sir, they've exploded online. Feminine, powerful branding, the mystery behind the designer is part of their allure." Adrian nodded slowly. "Get me a meeting." He once demanded her presence. Now he begged for her attention, without even knowing it. Meanwhile, Maya's studio had transformed into an empire in silence. Each piece was a secret weapon, elegance wrapped in memory. Her designs now reached Paris, Dubai, London, yet she stayed in her modest apartment, her heart never forgetting the rain-soaked night that began it all. Sometimes, when she'd open her order dashboard, she'd smile at the names of her clients, CEOs, artists, influencers, all women finding strength through her work. One order, however, caught her eye. A bulk purchase request from AM Industries. The name beneath the request form? Adrian Malik. Her hands froze, her breath caught between disbelief and poetic justice. For a long moment, she stared at the name, then leaned back in her chair and let out a soft, bitter laugh. "He's still trying to buy what he couldn't break," she murmured. Zara picked over her shoulder. "Maya,
That's him, isn't it? Maya nodded, her smile sharp as glass. Yes, the storm found its way home. The man who once threw her out in the rain was now knocking at her door. She didn't answer immediately. She made him wait 3 weeks before replying to the inquiry. When her brand manager finally reached out, the reply was curt yet courteous. Ray appreciates your interest in partnership. Please schedule a proposal meeting. M. Ray. Adrian received the email late at night. He was in his empty office, whiskey in hand, pride in shambles. He squinted at the name. M. Ray. Something about it felt familiar, but his mind was too clouded by desperation to notice what his heart might have recognized. He smiled faintly, imagining this collaboration as his lifeline. Whoever this Ray is, they'll help me rebuild, he muttered to himself. He was planning a comeback, unaware that destiny had already cast him as the villain in her story. The day of the meeting arrived. Maya didn't attend in person. She watched through a live camera feed, her identity hidden, her voice altered through an intermediary. Adrian walked into the sleek conference room, dressed impeccably, but the weariness beneath his charm showed. He looked older, humbled perhaps, though not yet redeemed. When the meeting began, the representative for Ray read Maya's script, her questions, her terms, her silence between lines. Every sentence carried her essence, poised, confident, cold. Adrian felt something strange, a familiarity in the phrasing. It reminded him of the way she used to speak when she still had hope. But he shook it off. He couldn't possibly connect the dots. When the meeting ended, Adrian said, "Tell your boss, Mr. Ray, that I admire their vision." The rep smiled faintly. "It's Miss Ray." Adrian blinked, thrown off balance. "Miss?" "Yes," the rep said smoothly. "She prefers privacy, but she built this company from scratch, alone." Adrian's throat tightened for reasons he couldn't explain. He just nodded and walked out. He left the meeting unaware that the ghost of his past had just signed his future. That night, Maya stood at her window. The rain had started again. Soft and nostalgic, she looked out, her reflection merging with the storm. So many nights she had stood like this, wishing he'd apologize, wishing he'd call. Now she didn't need his voice to validate her silence. She whispered, "The rain didn't end that night. It just began again inside me." And for the first time, her tears weren't of sorrow. They were release. Revenge didn't roar. It arrived dressed in grace. Over the next few weeks, the collaboration proceeded. Adrian's team struggled to meet Ray's demands: quality, precision, ethics. He found himself being lectured by her representatives, his suggestions overruled, his pride tested. He'd once been the man who dictated terms. Now he was being dictated to. One night, frustrated, he slammed his laptop shut and muttered, "Who the hell does she think she is?" But deep down, something told him he knew. Something about that quiet authority, that elegance laced with fire. He once silenced her voice. Now he couldn't stop hearing echoes of it in every word that challenged him. Maya watched every move, every email, every word he sent. She didn't hate him anymore. Hatred was too small, too fleeting. She just understood now. Power doesn't scream. It rebuilt. One evening, Zara asked, "Will you ever tell him who you are?" Maya smiled softly. "Not yet," she said. "Let him build the stage he'll kneel on." The sweetest revenge isn't destroying someone. It's letting them destroy themselves while you rise. Weeks later, the collaboration's final launch event was announced to be held at a grand hotel. Adrian's company needed the publicity. Maya's brand needed closure. She decided she would attend, not as M. Ray, but as the woman he had thrown out. But this time, she would walk in wearing the empire he helped build unknowingly. She left that night in the rain with nothing. She'd return under chandeliers with everything. Sometimes, the best apology is watching them realize what they destroyed. The chandeliers shimmered like captured lightning, golden, untouchable, suspended high above the grand ballroom of the Sapphire Crown Hotel. Everything gleamed: marble floors, crystal glassware, champagne laughter. A night built for triumph. A night built for her. Maya Khan, M. Ray, stood before the mirror in the dressing suite and stairs. Her reflection was no longer the trembling girl who once cried in the rain. She was fire wrapped in silk. Her dress, a deep emerald satin, flowing and fierce. Her jewelry, her own creation, every piece handcrafted with the precision of pain turned art. She pinned her hair back, revealing her neck like a declaration. Tonight wasn't about revenge. Not entirely. It was about closure. Because closure wasn't given. It was taken. She came not to burn him down, but to show him how small his fire had always been. Downstairs, the crowd gathered for the Rie XAM collaboration launch. Reporters, influencers, investors, everyone buzzing about the mysterious CEO, Ms. M. Ray, finally making a public appearance. Adrian Malik entered with practiced charm, his smile carefully arranged, his suit immaculate. But the confidence was an illusion, cracks beneath polished skin. He needed this deal. Without it, AM Industries was done. He greeted journalists with half-hearted smiles, shaking hands while checking his watch. "Is Miss Ray here yet?" he asked his assistant. "Not yet, sir, but she's expected shortly." He nodded, unaware that every second brought him closer to a reckoning years in the making. He thought tonight would save his legacy, not expose his ruin. Maya walked down the staircase, every step echoing like thunder cloaked in grace. The crowd turned, gasps rippling through the room as her presence commanded silence. Adrian turned too, slowly. For a heartbeat, his world stopped. The air around him fractured into disbelief, because the woman walking toward the center of the stage wasn't Miss Ray. It was her, Maya. The same Maya he'd thrown out years ago, soaked, shivering, begging him to see her. Now, she stood beneath the chandeliers, radiant, composed, and untouchably powerful. The ghost of his past had just stepped into the spotlight, alive, regal, and holding his future in her hands. She reached the podium, her calm voice echoing through the mic. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Maya Khan, though some of you may know me better as M. Ray, founder and CEO of Ray. A stunned hush fell across the room. Flashbulbs exploded, reporters leaned forward. Adrian froze, his glass slipping slightly in his hand. M. Ray, Maya Khan, the name burned through him like ice. For a long moment, he couldn't breathe. He'd spent years trying to forget her name, only to hear it applauded louder than his own. Maya continued, poised, unbothered. "At Ray, we believe in transformation, in turning scars into symbols, pain into purpose." Her gaze found Adrian in the crowd. "And sometimes, in watching what's broken, learn how to rebuild itself." A soft murmur rippled through the hall, admiration mixed with awe. Maya smiled gently, not at him, but through him, as though addressing something larger than revenge. Destiny, perhaps. After her speech, she stepped down. The business representatives called both CEOs for the final signing. Adrian approached, struggling to compose himself. "Maya, you're M. Ray?" His voice cracked slightly. She looked at him with the serenity of someone who'd already won long ago. "Welcome to Rie, Mr. Malik. Let's talk about how we can save your company." Once he taught her silence through humiliation. Now she spoke softly, and it terrified him more than any scream. They sat across a grand glass table, lawyers and executives surrounding them. Every flash of the camera, every whisper in the crowd, all centered on her. Adrian's palms were damp. His usual swagger dissolved into anxious laughter. He tried to make small talk. "You look different, successful." She replied without looking up. "I am." Her pen glided across the document. The deal terms had already been negotiated, harsh but fair. AM Industries would become the junior partner. Ray would hold creative control, majority shares, and veto power. Adrian read the clauses, his stomach twisting. This puts us under your management." Maya smiled faintly. "Under my command, Mr. Malik. There's a difference." He once threw her out of his house. Now she owned the building he worked in. The room went silent. Even the camera seemed to hesitate, sensing the electricity between the two. Adrian leaned closer, lowering his voice. Maya, please. This isn't necessary. Whatever happened between us happened because of you, she finished calmly. And this, she gestured around him, this happened because of me. He tried to apologize then, words tumbling over guilt and disbelief. I was wrong, Maya. I was stupid, arrogant. I didn't know what I had. She looked at him for the first time with something resembling pity. You didn't lose me because you didn't know what you had, Adrian. You lost me because you thought you'd never lose me. Apologies mean little when they arrive to a woman who's already rebuilt herself without you. He reached across the table impulsively, his voice breaking. Maya, please! She raised her hand, stopping him with the quiet authority of a queen. This is a business meeting, Mr. Malik. Let's keep it professional. The use of Mr. Malik hit him harder than any insult. He sat back, defeated, watching her sign the final document with steady grace. The contract was sealed. The empire was hers. Cameras flashed, executives clapped, and somewhere in that applause, Adrian Malik's pride was buried, quietly, completely. Revenge didn't need fire or fury. Sometimes it just needed a signature. After the meeting, Maya walked through the ballroom as investors congratulated her. Adrian followed, desperate for a moment alone. He finally caught her by the elevator. Maya, please, can we just talk? She turned, her face unreadable. There's nothing left to say, she said softly. You taught me that silence has power. I just learned how to use it. He looked broken, not theatrically, but truthfully. The man who once looked down at her was now looking up, eyes pleading. Maya, Don't, she interrupted. Whatever you feel now, save it. It's too late to give back what you took. She stepped into the elevator. As the doors began to close, she added, Goodbye, Mr. Malik. I hope you finally learn what it means to build something without breaking someone. The doors slid shut. She left him not in anger, but in silence, and that silence echoed louder than any storm. That night, Adrian returned to his office. The lights felt colder, the air heavier. Every wall reminded him of the empire he built on arrogance and the woman who turned it into art. He poured himself a drink, but it tasted like regret. He stared at the contract, at her name beside his, Maya Khan, CEO, Ray. He whispered to the empty room, I used to think I owned the world, but it turns out I was just renting it from her. He once measured wealth in power. Now he measured loss in the echo of her name. Meanwhile, Maya stood on her balcony overlooking the city. Rain began to fall again, gentle, cleansing. Zara joined her, smiling quietly. It's poetic, isn't it, how the rain always returns when it's time for you to start again? Maya nodded, her voice steady. The rain used to remind me of what I lost. Now it reminds me of what I survived. She watched the droplets hit the glass, her reflection strong and whole. Revenge had ended, but her rebirth had just begun.
Forgiveness isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the sharpest blade. The city was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. Clouds hung heavy over the skyline, pregnant with rain and memory. Inside the tall glass tower of Ray headquarters, Maya sat by her office window, watching the horizon fade into silver. The deal was done. The empire stood. Her name, once whispered in mockery, was now spoken with reverence. But peace? Peace hadn't come yet, because victory wasn't always the same as healing. She had conquered everything outside her except the storm that still lived within. Across the city, Adrian Malik sat in his dim office. The once bustling space that used to echo with power now smelled like stale coffee and loss. His employees spoke softly around him, pity more than respect. The screens that once displayed profits now blinked red with decline. And on his desk, beneath unpaid invoices, sat a single document, the partnership contract with Reye. Every time he looked at her signature, it felt like fate signing him away. He'd been to hell before, but this was colder. For days, he tried to gather the courage to face her, to say the words that had burned in his throat since that night under the chandeliers. But pride dies slow. Still, something in him had changed. The arrogance had bled out. The man who once laughed at her was now silent, haunted by the echo of her name in every hallway he walked. He built walls to feel powerful. Now he stood trapped behind them. A week later, Rain returned to the city. Soft at first, then steady, like the universe pressing replay. Adrian found himself standing in front of Reye Tower. No appointment, no excuses, just a man who finally understood the weight of the door he had once slammed shut. He took a deep breath and walked in. The receptionist froze slightly, recognizing him. "Mr. Malik, Ms. Khan isn't expecting visitors." He nodded. "I know. Tell her Adrian is here to apologize." The words felt foreign on his tongue. But true. For the first time in years, truth didn't hurt. It healed. Minutes later, he was led to her office, the same one she had once entered as a guest, now her kingdom. Maya looked up from her desk when the door opened. Her eyes didn't widen in surprise. She had expected this day. Not out of ego, but inevitability. He stood there, drenched in rain, his expensive suit clinging to him like remorse. "Adrian," she said softly, "you're soaked." He gave a hollow laugh. "It's fitting, isn't it? Seems the rain and I keep meeting at my lowest." Once he threw her out into the storm. Now he came back carrying his own. He sat across from her, unsure how to begin. Silent stretched, broken only by the patter of rain on glass. Finally he spoke. "I lost everything I thought mattered. Money, status, people who pretended to care. But losing you. That was the one loss I earned." Maya didn't respond. Her eyes were calm, unreadable. He continued, his voice trembling with something dangerously close to humility. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just need to say it. I was cruel. I mocked your dreams because I couldn't see beyond my own ego. I tried to break you because you reminded me of everything I wasn't." Maya leaned back, fingers resting against the polished desk. She studied him, not as an enemy, not as a memory, but a man stripped of illusion. "Why now?" she asked. "Because for the first time," he whispered, "I finally know what it's like to be thrown out by the world and left in the rain." Her heart flinched, not for him, but for the version of herself that had once begged for this apology. The words she'd once prayed to hear came too late, arriving at the doorstep of a heart that no longer needed them. She stood and walked toward the window, watching the raindrops trace paths down the glass. "Do you know what hurt the most, Adrian?" He shook his head. "It wasn't that you threw me out. It was that you did it so easily, like love had an expiration date." He lowered his head. "If I could take it back," she said simply. "You can't. But you can learn from it." He looked at her then, really looked. Gone was the fragile girl who needed validation. Before him stood a woman who had built an empire out of heartbreak and rain. She said, "I forgive you." The words were soft, but sharp enough to pierce. He blinked, stunned. You do?" "Yes," she replied, "because forgiveness isn't for you. It's for me." She forgave not to heal him, but to finally release herself. He tried to smile, but it faltered. "So what happens now?" Maya turned back to her desk, gathering her files. "Now you work. You rebuild. You learn what respect really means, even when it's under someone else's roof." He nodded, the weight of humility settling on his shoulders. "Do you ever think we could—" She stopped him with a look. Kind, but final. "No, Adrian, we had our story. It ended the night you chose pride over love. She stepped closer, her tone steady. You taught me how cruel the world can be, but I taught myself how powerful I could become. He swallowed hard, every word landing like truth carved in stone. She didn't need revenge anymore. She had evolution. As she walked him to the door, the rain grew heavier outside, thunder rolling faintly in the distance. He paused before leaving, his voice barely above a whisper. Thank you for not destroying me. Maya smiled faintly. I didn't need to. You already did that yourself. She turned away as he stepped into the hall, leaving behind the scent of rain and regret. Outside, Adrian stood beneath the storm once more. The city blurred around him, the rain soaking into his clothes, just like that night years ago. But this time, it wasn't punishment. It was clarity. He looked up, eyes closed, letting the water wash over his face. Maybe he thought this was what it meant to start again. Not with power, not with control, but with surrender. The rain that once drowned him now taught him how to breathe. Inside her office, Maya returned to her desk. Her assistant entered quietly. Ma'am, shall I cancel the next meeting? She shook her head. No, let's continue. The rain doesn't stop us anymore. She smiled, not out of pride, but peace. Because some victories don't roar. Some just exhale. She walked to the balcony, watching the storm. Every drop felt like a full circle. The rain that once broke her was now her applause. He threw her out into the storm, but she became the lightning he could never survive. A story of love, loss, and rebirth, where cruelty met consequence and forgiveness became the final act of power.